Well, I might show you now a little bit of what you can do when playing with others or other people that play the guitar, perhaps. I'm just trying to see if it would focus, but it's not working so great. Now I'd show you what you can do to play with others and other people that may even play the acoustic guitar as well. So I might title this How to Play Chords Better or something like that. I just wish it would focus here. Unless I got the other lamp focusing for a split second. Let me try the other lamp and see. Alright, well that's the best I can come up with, but that looks quite a bit better. I thought the natural lighting might work, but I think again. So this is going to be a video on things you can do, once again, to play with others. Things you can do to interact with other guitar players and people that you know that might play other instruments as well. And you might have heard on the cover I've done recently of Jimmy Rogers where I did something unorthodox and I went like this. I basically did less work than playing the regular C chord. And by less work I mean I took off finger. So this is how you can modify your chords. I'm going to research what I'll call this video. But here you saw in the video of Jimmy Rogers where I went like this, rather than what he's actually doing, which is adding on the pinky to get a bluesy note. Now this note here is the note B flat, and it's quite a bluesy note in general. And that's what's on the real recording of Jimmy Rogers. And this is, of course, a C dominant 7. And what I did was what I'm calling less work. And this is, again, not on the recording, but you begin messing around in interesting ways. So what I did was I took off the index finger and went like this to achieve that sound. And in that situation, I was strumming across all the strings fairly evenly. But what you'll find when you start doing this style is, or experimenting in this style, I don't mean the style of Jimmy Rogers, I mean adding on fingers, taking them off, changing their positions and whatnot, is that you'd be focusing in on what's happening, so with the right hand. So if the action, so to speak, was mainly happening here around the second string, like if that's what was coming off, I would focus my pick in this vicinity rather than strumming across all 6 strings evenly. Or in this case 5. You get the idea. So that's one thing I did in the Jimmy Rogers video. Rather than playing C dominant 7, which was something like this, it was, I took off and I came up with this and just tried a different sound, which is the C major 7. You might have heard that lesson or that cover and thought, what is he playing? Some kind of unusual E minor, and you might not have been able to work out the chord progression, or of other songs that use this chord. So what I did was a regular C chord minus the index finger, so it's less work. So let's talk about another thing you can do with the C chord. Well, as you may know, this is the note, if you just saw the last live stream, you may know this as the note G on the thinnest string, 2nd fret. But the C chord already contains a G, played open. And these are called open chords because a lot of the first chords you learn, like E and etc., and the C like we just played, because they contain strings that are fretted and strings that are played open, largely. So the C chord already has a G played open, so we would be adding in basically a high G, if you like. So this does not change the name of the chord. It's still a C chord. It's just got redundant information, like you got the G played open and you're adding on another high G, so you're fundamentally not changing the name of it at all. Then what's the purpose of it? Is because it would be, say you're playing a tune and I'm focusing a lot on the left hand right now, but with the right hand you want to focus in on where the action is, but I can come to that. But say you're doing what I do and you're singing and you're playing and what have you, and you get to a point in the tune where you're just waiting for the next verse or the next chorus or the next section. You know, one of the worst things you can do really is just remain on the chord in sort of a boring way. You want to experiment with such a thing, so you could add on the pinky there like that. Say you were going like this, just as the most basic example I can think of. I'll do 4 strums like this, and then add it on. So I'm calling this messing around with chords because it sounds like, you know, something fun that anyone can do. And so let's talk about what else you might do with the C, the open C chord. Well, you can also do what Jimmy Rogers did and putting the pinky on the 3rd string 3rd fret and get the C dominant 7, not to be confused with the C major 7 I just told you, because you're adding that B flat note and a very bluesy note. But let's say you wanted to do what was in between the thinnest string and the 3rd string, and you put it here on the 2nd string 3rd fret. C add 9, I would call it. Because look at how it kind of resembles the way you would play C add 9 like this. Look at, you put this. I'm trying to reconfigure my fingers here, but, or you might play C add 9 with the pinky added on, still C add 9. Now you go from G to C add 9. It's kind of a soulful way of playing C, isn't it? And sometimes you might find the pinky not there and adding on and adding on. So why am I saying this? Well, because if you look at it, where our middle finger is, we're now fretting here. So think of it here like this. Our first finger would be on the 2nd fret 4th string. Well, here we're reconfiguring it, and now we're adding the first finger on like a regular C chord. Now this is being fretted by the pinky, talking about the 3rd fret 2nd string. So you can call that C add 9, just a different way of doing it. You know, because you're seemingly hundreds of thousands of chords out there, but the question is, what do you do with them? And these basic chords are some of the fundamental ones you learn on the guitar, and the ones you get a lot of mileage out of. And the major chords that I'm showing you now are much more modifiable than your minor chords, so it's pretty important to establish the different ways you can do that, because the pinky is like your best friend with this. So the pinky, to do Jimmy Rogers, it would play the B flat note on the 3rd fret on the 3rd string, going from, and that was coupled with the boom chicka pattern. See how it adds a really bluesy effect? You know, we love bluesy effects on this page. Like this. You just have it creep on there, and then you'd switch to the F and so on. We'll get to the F in another lesson or something. So I want to show you an easier way to play the F, because the F gives you some trouble. But you can play the F real quick without the thinnest string, because a quick tip of the F, and I'll make a shorts out of this, would be kind of tucking in the elbow. I've always told you in the past to keep the elbow free. But sometimes with a chord like this, you want to tuck in the elbow almost as though it's coming towards the guitar body, because this angles the first finger, because the first finger has to fret 2 strings, 1 and 2, but that's not really the hard part. The hard part is the whole chord, getting the whole chord. And this is a chord, this exact version of it, that I play all the time. So you're tucking in the elbow, almost coming in, and that causes your index to turn so you can get that clarity of the 2 notes. because the F is hard enough as it is, but you might find a situation where you want to test out a song and you're not getting the F chord, working right. Try this. This is another way of playing F, kind of F major 7 though. Quite a nice sound for Christmas. So we talked about C, a little bit on the F. Another thing you can do is not just adding on fingers, not just taking off fingers, changing the positioning of fingers. Now here's a 50s trick. Now notice here, I call it 50s because it's kind of rockabilly sound. C6 you might say. And again, I'm focusing the action on what's happening. So if the action, whatever's hand is moving, being added on or taken off, I'm generally focusing on that with the pick. I call it, focusing in with the right hand. So I'm kind of focusing in this vicinity so the listener hears it. Now there's all different rhythms you can apply to this, but essentially what I'm doing is taking my second finger and moving it from where it was originally with the C chord to the 2nd fret on the 3rd string. With kind of a shuffle, feel. So that's the C, some ideas for the C chord, but you kind of get the idea. So let's look at a couple other chords, if you can do the C. Let's say a D chord, for example, what you can do with the D. Hope you have some familiarity with D. Well, one thing you can do is lifting off. This could be a nice introduction to a song, or even if you made an arpeggio pattern on it. Lifting off the 2nd fret on the thinnest string, which would be covered by the 2nd finger. Another thing is adding on the pinky here to the 3rd fret on the thinnest string with the pinky. So I've spoken a lot about names so far, but you don't need to worry that much about names, throughout this whole lesson. Because you might already recognize songs like, I don't know. So what I did there was a combination of both. I'm adding on, taking off. Or rather, I meant to show you one that's a combination, But that's one there. And I hope you like this lesson. Don't forget to subscribe as well. I thought I could show you another example. Keep the formation of the chord while you're strumming and you let the fingers creep in. So then I let the pinky creep in, off, took off the 2nd finger. So sometimes it's about creating like an arpeggio pattern. Sometimes it's about strumming the chord, but in general if you're strumming, you focus in the pick. Where the action is happening. So for example, I play a lot of 50s, you might do what Dion did, which is adding on the pinky now, and sometimes you venture off into a different fret when you do this. I'm adding the pinky onto the 4th fret onto the 3rd string. So you might have heard such things. He plays with the thumb pick, so do I, but today I'm using the flat pick. But here's my thumb pick here. And that's how he achieves that kind of effect with the D chord. So what's another chord you might like to look at? Well, we talked about C, we talked about the D chord. What about even the G chord? There's something you hear me do in a lot of songs. It makes me think of Runaway, where during the instrumental section, and again, you're kind of spicing things up when there's no vocals or you're waiting for the next section, keeping it interesting, because the worst thing you can do is like stay static. So in this case, I'm adding the first finger on, because I'm playing G like this, not like this. I'm playing G with second, third, and fourth finger, leaving the first finger free to add on. And one of the best things you can do is add on to the first fret on the second string with the first finger, like I do for Runaway. And that'd be something like, that, just adding it on tastefully. And I am strumming fairly evenly, but it's not so straight across the strings. Like I'm kind of emphasizing on that particular area of the strings rather than just being really mechanical. It's almost like the shuffle, you know. It's not so mechanical to where it's so even. You're not always super even on the guitar, and that, if that makes sense to you. So there's one you can add on there. And this reminds you of quite a few tunes, but I'm thinking of Runaway because that's the way I do it. Some of these you'll hear create kind of a spooky sound. My friend that likes The Who will like some of these. Another thing you can do is take that Rockabilly 6 idea, focus in again on, like, say, the 4 bottom strings, 6, 5, 4, 3 or so, and begin moving again. Second finger, move it onto the second fret on the 4th string, for example, rather than keeping it on the second fret on the 5th. Go like this, watch. So you don't even really need to practice that, but I can show you real quick the right hand. So again, I'm focusing the pick on the bottom 4 strings on the guitar, the 4 fat ones. While I have it on that view, let's look at another chord here. I'm making the E major chord now with the left hand. The good old E chord. Well, one thing you can do with the E major is you can add the pinky on to the thinnest string on the second fret. You can add the pinky onto the second string, second fret, or onto the third string, second fret. So you're tucking it in underneath the formation that's already there, tucking it in wherever available to you. I'll show you real quick, but I wanted to show you that strumming. Yeah, this guitar is the very cool Martin Jumbo 21 as well. So here I'm adding thinnest, second string, and here it's almost all bunched together. Those are just a couple examples of what you can do with the E. Let's talk about A major. Good old A major. What did I just do there? That should evoke some Beatles sounds. Well, that's, again, kind of a spooky sound, especially if you were to strum. You know, one could strum as well. My friend that likes The Who will like that one. So that's taking the ring finger off at a particular time in rhythm from the second fret on the second string, taking it off. But another thing you can do is add on. You can begin adding on the pinky onto the third fret, which is adjacent. Another thing that you hear me do frequently with the Everly Brothers and the Buddy Holly is taking off, simply just focusing in on the middle section of the guitar and taking off the second finger and going from A to the A7. So I showed you many examples of that Rockabilly 6. I showed you with the D chord, I showed you with the G, I showed you with the C. Here we're talking about going from A to A7. And you might hear the same sounds but see different fingering by going like this. Well, I'm showing you how to lift off. Let's take a quick look at the right hand. Well, let me show you a quick real-life song example of that, going from that A to the A7. just did it there. I don't want to, that might have even evoked copyright. But you gotta pay the price to teach properly. What I'm telling you is that when you're playing around with these chords, the same effect can be achieved simply by lifting off a finger rather than taking off